You have a right to be noticed. You have a right to be informed that there is a lawsuit pending against you. You have a right to be informed of the nature of the lawsuit, like what is the lawsuit saying that you did wrong, and you have a right to respond. And as far as I know, a couple of our clients that we represented were never named in the lawsuit. Their children were never named, and they were never provided service of the lawsuit as provided by law. So there were entire, just like they completely ignored entire provisions of our law to get this case. Wow. Though we didn't have to go to those extremes to like file federal lawsuits on this matter, because the appellate court took care of it.
This may be kind of I don't know if this is an off-topic question, but we had mentioned earlier that we're all grateful that Warren Jeffs is in prison now, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, and he ended up becoming, like, his life sentences are in Texas. He was already imprisoned in Utah, but his life sentences, what really sealed the deal was the evidence from the ranch and what happened in Texas. Would he have been able to be arrested and have all of those crimes come forward and have the children still have been with their parents? I don't know if that question's clear. Like, what happened with the mothers and the children and this horrible thing that happened, if that hadn't happened, would they have been able to catch Warren? Do you know?
I honestly don't know. I wasn't involved in the criminal case.
Okay.
I do know. I mean, we can talk about the phone call.
Yeah.
And there's a million conspiracies about that phone call. Who was really behind it?
Oh yeah.
What was, did the agent who signed the affidavit stating that these were the facts, these are the facts. Did he really know that what he was swearing to was the actual truth? Because they were already talking about that phone call at the time of the adversary hearing, that it had not come from Texas at all.
Yeah,
they already knew it had come out of Colorado.
Right.
I don't think they discovered who it was that made the phone call until after. But there was also conflicting information and it wasn't just one phone call, it was two. And there was conflicting information given both times. The first time, the caller stated that she was married to a man and she was pregnant. She had a baby and she was pregnant again, and that he had 7 wives. The second time she called, she wasn't pregnant and the man only had 3 or 4 wives.
And it was the same girl who called both times? Same
person both times.
Interesting.
So there were already inconsistencies. And I know in the criminal case, they tried to attack that search warrant based on that affidavit. But they held that it was all valid, because if they had found that it was invalid, that would have thrown everything out. Everything they found at the ranch would have been determined to be, it's a legal principle called fruit of the poisonous tree. If you go in and you take something and you're not entitled to, your search warrant for whatever reason is invalid, then everything you discover from that point on is also invalid.
Wow.
So
that would have been crazy.
They had to cling to that phone call in order to validate everything that happened with Warren Jeffs.
Yeah, they basically went, that's our story and we're sticking to it. And,
but at the same time, that story is what took the kids away.
Yeah, that's how they took the kids. And that's how they were able to get into the temple and how they were able to get into all the homes.
Right.
I know at the time, what outraged me was, even though I was glad that the authorities were going in and finally doing something about Warren Jeffs, I had problems with Midland County sending a tank And I remember just people getting on me for like, oh, how dare you say something like that? And my question always was, why does Midland County need a tank?
Yeah.
And that means I'm a Warren Jeff supporter simply because I'm saying, I don't think the government should be allowed to do that.
Well, even sending in, like I said, we had talked with a CPA agent who was one of the first ones to go in. And she even said as a CPS agent, you walk in and there are tanks and there are snipers on both sides.
Militarized law enforcement. Yes.
Yeah. And there
very big problem.
Yeah. And she was like, this was not a normal situation from the get-go. Even by the time CPS was going in, she was like, this was so uncomfortable and traumatic even for anybody involved there, because they didn't know what was going on and why it was being handled that way from the beginning.
And most of the people in that area had never heard of FLDS, even LDS. So they had no idea what they were getting into, what these people were all about.
Yeah.
So I can kind of understand from that point of view how afraid they may have been, given the information and the view that they had as they arrived and saw all of these tanks. Like, okay, this is a really bad situation, because that's the way it was portrayed to them. So with that being said, the agents on the ground, the CPA agents on the ground, I can see why they would that they would take those or want to take the children from their mothers, because maybe they thought that something really bad was going on.
Well,
yeah, I feel like it was just a crummy situation, all around. Whatever was happening from the top, it seemed like there was not a lot of communication going down, or any sense being made of it. Because this agent also said exactly what you were saying, that the way the procedures
was not good.
She was like, no, the court was 100% right. The judge was 100% right in saying it was not handled the right way. She goes, the entire time, even as an agent, they were like, this is not how we do things. Why is this happening this way? Why are you asking this of us?
What? Yeah. The safety plans, every safety plan. Well, in your average CPS case, when you come up with the safety plan, you're supposed to do it with in conjunction with the parents and, their attorneys. In this case, every time CPS wanted to meet with our clients, they wanted us there. The FLDS wanted us there. And in your usual CPS case, that wouldn't happen. The attorney wouldn't show up. It would be just, okay, take notes. Don't say this. Don't do that. Show up, wear clean clothes, and so on. But in this particular case, because there was absolutely no trust between the FLDS and CPS by this point, or even the court-appointed special advocates, I still give that organization a side eye for some of the things that they did, especially to the attorneys who represented the children. But that did, that's another thing. That's another issue. In this particular case, it was, okay, here's the safety plan, sign it. And every single safety plan for every single child, no matter how old that child was exactly the same. Didn't matter what, if the child was a baby, didn't matter if the child was 17 and about to age out. That family safety plan was exactly the same. And some of the requirements that I remember, I've already brought up one, were just absolutely laughable, because CPS was making a big thing, or whoever was running their media was making a big deal about the fact that the children were always, outside working in the garden.
Oh no, hard work.
Yeah,
I know there's a line. I know that there's a line, so maybe I shouldn't laugh quite as hard. But
there's, and I realized they were making the children work all the time in the garden. But the way it was being presented to us at the time was, oh my God, they make these children go and work in the fields. And then when you get the safety plan under activities parent and child can do together, parent and child can garden.
Wow.
And then they made everybody go to a parenting class. And the first parenting class, they went in groups. And the first parenting class apparently didn't go very well because the women started laughing. So, get on the phone, call your client. Hey, what's going on? Well, apparently they were laughing because what they were being told in the parenting classes was exactly what they were already doing.
Yeah.
Like, make sure your child gets a bath every day. If their diaper gets dirty, change it.
Oh my word.
Make sure you feed them nutritional food.
Oh my
Stuff
word.
They were already it's like
these women are like, we're doing this to 12 children at the same time successfully. Like, what are you?
Wow.
Why? At this point, it just seemed that the state did not want to make any steps towards understanding how these families were really running and what actually they may have needed. They just didn't care. It just, at that point, to me, I just like, okay, it's obvious they don't care. My personal opinion is that whoever made these decisions from up top, they were trying to destroy this group. And the reason that they took all the kids was because they had already decided that no matter what these parents did, they were going to terminate their parental rights and get these children adopted out. No matter what. And that just, there's a whole lot of other things that went on that were really so unusual and awful. And I've had struggles emotionally with it since.
Yeah, I was going to say the hard thing too. Yes, there were awful things that were also happening on that ranch, and part of the shame, I guess, that's maybe the right word for it. The shame in all of the fact that they weren't willing to go case by case into individual families is to separate, like you said, they grabbed them all as one community when there could have been, or there was in some cases, actual abuse that could have been found where those children could have been protected. But by grabbing all of the children and assuming that everyone was in danger, they ruined the chance of being able to actually protect the people who needed it.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it overwhelmed the whole process by taking that many.
If CPS had just limited themselves to the teenage girls, those are the children who were at risk. You're protecting them. Great.
Yeah.
In our cases, if that had happened, well, okay, our clients are dismissed from the case. You get your children back. Congratulations. Don't let your children get married before they're 18, please.
Right.
And, go on about your business. But that's not what they did. And another thing that really makes me angry is they kept going about how the FLDS are taught that people from the outside are not there to help them. Well, what did they do to these children? They saw their mothers being pointed, guns being waved at their mothers, and everyone being threatened at gunpoint and being marched out of their homes at gunpoint. Everything CPS did traumatized those children. CPS claimed they were going to keep the children who were part of one family unit. They were going to keep them all together, like sibling groups together. They split them up. There was one family, I can't remember who they were, and I don't think they were one of our clients, but their children ended up in 3 or 4 different placements, from Amarillo to Dallas to, I think, Houston. And they spent their time between the removal and when getting the children back on the road, driving from one placement to the other, because CPS, if you miss an appointment to visit with your children, they hold it against you.
Oh, wow.
So they spent they were sleeping in their truck by the side of the road because they couldn't afford a hotel.
Trying to get back and forth to every child.
Trying to visit all their children. And worst of all, there was one little boy who was put in a placement and none of his siblings were there. And his ad litem had to fight tooth and nail to get him moved to a placement where there was at least one other of his brother or sisters there.
Wow.
How long? So we know that they got put into like you were saying, like the Coliseum and the other places. How long were they in there? And then did all the children end up in like actual foster care, like in the placement in different areas? Did they all get out of there before they were all released? Or was it just like some like that had started and then the decree came that everyone was released?
No, they kept things. They kept the children at the Coliseum and I think Fort Concho for at least a week, because I was going over the our mandamus petition, and it was obviously filed before CPS came in and took the children out of the Coliseum and Fort Concho. But I think sometime within a week or maybe a week and a half is when they separated the mothers from the children. And instead of, we had been asking them, hey, this is going to be bad on everybody. It's going to be awful when it comes time to separate the children. We were doing our best to prepare our clients for this. We were told, oh, hey, we'll give you a heads up so you can call your clients and let them know, and they won't be shocked. And of course, that did not happen. They simply made all of the women get up and leave and go to another room. And then they took the children. And of course, and it's basically just grabbing them and putting them on a bus. The absolute worst thing they could have done. And it was gonna be bad. Separating the children was gonna be bad to begin with. Nobody wants to hear children crying because it really bothers us, because it brings back our memories of when we were that young and upset and not understanding what was going on. And instead of having the mothers prepare the children and take them calmly to the buses, as calmly as possible, and putting them on the buses and letting them know it's going to be okay, this is just temporary, they just came in and forced all the women out of the room and pushed the kids onto the buses and took them off to all these different foster placements all across the state. Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston. I think there was some of them were sent to Corpus Christi. Some of them were sent to San Antonio. None of them came down to the area where I live. I actually live closer to the border. None of them were brought down where I lived, but they were spread out, and their sibling groups were divided up, and that was intentional.
Sheesh.
Now, I have a question. From your perspective, or from representing the mothers, we had been told by someone before that the mothers had the opportunity to stay with the children if they were willing to leave the husbands, like in a protective, because there was supposed abuse. They would say, if you would come, we can put you into safe houses. We can protect you both. We can take you and your children, but you have to leave the husband. And they said that's very common in the outside world. They did offer that to those women, and the women were choosing to stay. Did your clients feel like they had a choice, like between staying with their husband or going with their children? Or what was it from your point of view?
I've already touched on that they claimed they were not being abused. And I remember there being offers for the women to go to shelters, but not in context of the children would be brought to them if they went to the shelter.
Oh, really?
Okay.
I remember the offer for them to go to the shelter being made, but or to women's shelters. I remember that, but none of them would say that they were being abused. And I don't remember it being in the context of you'll get your children back if you do this. I don't recall that. It's possible that was the offer. I just don't remember.
Which is totally fine. I wasn't trying to put you too much on the spot. That was definitely a piece of it that when we heard that, like you said, they would have to admit to abuse or be willing to leave their husbands. Right. And they did say that was the reason why the women weren't, they were doing that. But obviously that would have made a whole.
Yeah.
Well, so many different
in
aspects.
order to get, shelters, space in women's shelters is already limited as it is. There's more need than there is actual space available. So for them to actually get into a women's shelter, they would have to claim to be victims of abuse. And they said they weren't.
I see. So if they say they're not, then that's not going to get them there. Interesting.
It won't get them in.
So another question for you. We see on some of these documentaries, women going on news sources and talking about their situations and trying to get people to come help them. Were you involved, or did you know much about these women coming forward like this?
You mean the ones that want to leave?
The ones that would go on talk shows, and they would talk about the experiences they were having. About
their children being ripped away. How there was that kind of media push to get attention to it.
Those were, a lot of those women were not our clients. They were the ones.
The inner circle ones, right?
Yeah. I remember we were offered, I know a couple of our clients did an interview, and I can't remember if it was with ABC or I can't remember what the news organization was. And so we were asked to ask our clients if they wanted to appear, and most of our clients did not want to appear.
I see.
A couple of them did. And that interview was so extremely edited. It was infuriating because I was there, even though my clients weren't there. The attorneys who were representing them asked me, and they asked other people to be there too as witnesses to hear what the women said, and then to see what was actually shown on the news program. And it was a very highly edited segment, and it kind of kept to the story that particular reporter wanted to say. And a lot of the things that the women had been saying, which was some of the stuff I've been telling you, was cut. Which is why a lot of people have never heard these things before.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow.
I mean,
thank you for sharing your side, because this is important that people have the full picture.
Yeah. Well, and I also want to add a little bit about the Coliseum, because in one of the documentaries, the young man who was in, I don't know, I couldn't tell if he was at Fort Concho or if he was at the Coliseum, but I just want to back up and let him know that he's not crazy. The conditions really were that bad. They were awful for us. They had us in a, one of the things that we had an argument about was CPS was controlling access to our clients. I don't know how much time you have left.
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay, because this might take a while. Sit down.
No, we'll get comfy.
Yeah, just get comfy.
Yeah,
we'll go grab a cup of tea.
We're here for it.
When all of our clients were being held at the Coliseum, and it was access was very strictly controlled. We had to go first. We had to go through all this rigmarole, so our driver's licenses, and attorneys. And something that really kind of offends attorneys is when you ask to see their bar card, because we're used to walking into court and I'm an attorney and here's my card. And even judges, I've never been asked by a judge to show my bar card. And they were asking for our bar cards, and it was like, excuse me? I'm sorry, you invited me to be here, and now you're questioning everything about my life. Wow. We had to have our pictures taken. We had to, I don't think we were fingerprinted. I don't think they went to that extreme. But it was still pretty invasive. Like, what vaccinations have you had? Really? Because apparently
the chickenpox thing, right?
Chickenpox went through was going wild. Well, go figure. They were holding these people in a place where a livestock show had been held the previous week, and they had not thoroughly cleaned that space.
Wow.
And they probably didn't even know that, they never got, the FLDS don't get vaccinated.
Right.
Yeah.
Either, right. So it's That's another one of those where it's like the cultural differences play so much in how much people understand of everything. It's like, if they're not vaccinated, they're way more likely. You put a bunch of unvaccinated people into one big place with outsiders coming in and out.
Yeah.
That's not clean. Like, you're creating the perfect storm.
Yeah. Well, even some of us got sick, not chicken pox or whooping cough or any of the other diseases. I mean, I had measles as a child. I had chicken pox as a child, bumps. So, I mean, I had all the immunities. And then when I went to law school, I had to get a measles vaccination again, even though I didn't need, I was like, I don't need one. I had it, but they still made me get it. So I got it. They put us in a show barn in a really small area, like where there were some offices, just a really large space, but not enough space where you could go and have like confidential conversations with your clients. And we were told, okay, this is the area you can be in. You can't be anywhere else. There was this really bad odor, and it was a mix of some sort of chemical, and I don't know if it was like a cleaning agent, a disinfectant, pesticide or what, but it just was awful. And mixed in with that was the smell of animal waste, and not recent animal waste, but waste that had been there for a while. It was awful. And so if those were the conditions where the children and the women were, and they were living there, I was only there for maybe, less than 20 hours, over the 2 or 3 times that I had to go there. I remember stepping out. I spoke with one client and they said, okay, we'll bring your next client in 15 minutes. Well, about 30 to 45 minutes had gone by and I still didn't have my client. So I stepped out of this little room into the show barn to see if I could find anybody to ask, hey, where's my client? And there was, to the left of me, there was a table where there were some CPS caseworkers sitting and a big burly law enforcement officer. And they immediately started yelling and shouting at me like, oh, you're not supposed to be here. You need to get out of here. And so the law enforcement guy came, I'm going to arrest you if you don't move. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be here. I'm an attorney. You invited me here to help you with this case. Why are you now threatening me with arrest? And as I turned around to go back into this area where we were, I saw all of this dirty hay piled as high as my knee in places. And that's where the animal odor was coming from. They basically just plowed like walking paths through this stuff instead of cleaning it out. It was disgusting. And then afterwards, I didn't feel very well. I had a spot in the back of my throat that a tickle that I never seemed to be able to get rid of, no matter how much water I drank and how much decongestant I took. And that hung on for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I was talking to one of my other colleagues and she's like, yeah, I mean, I got the crud from that place too. Wow. And she had it even worse. She had been even sicker than I was.
And that was just from visiting.
Just from visiting. Yeah. So I can only imagine having to, eat, sleep, go to the bathroom in that air, in a space like that they hadn't properly cleaned. And the women couldn't leave. They took all of their cell phones. So we had no way to contact them unless we went to the Coliseum.
Wow.
And we had no way to contact them during the adversary hearing if something came up that touched on them, which never did because our clients were never named. Even in the adversary hearing, the only person whose name kept coming up was, of course, Warren Jeffs. Mm-hmm. They were not allowed to leave the Coliseum. They were told if you left, then you can't come back. And they were not going to leave their children, even for the hearing. Mm-hmm. So we had no way to communicate with them during the hearing if something came up. The second day, they were allowed to come to the court hearing if their attorney took them to and from. So, but again, very, very few women opted for that because they didn't trust. By this point, they didn't trust anything CPS said. And even though, oh, no, you can come back, don't worry, they weren't going to take that chance. They were not going to take that chance.
When the children went from the Coliseum and were getting placed in foster homes and foster care, what was happening to the mothers that were there? Did the mothers have to stay at the Coliseum like that whole 6 weeks?
They were forced out. They're like, we're closing the Coliseum, we're closing Fort Concho.
So they just went back home.
CPS didn't care where they went. A lot of them ended up going back to the ranch because that's the only place they had.
Yeah. Right. Makes sense.
So,
So at this point, when the order comes in and all of the children and moms are returned to the ranch, is that kind of where the story ends for you, or do you know what happened beyond that point? Well,
after the children were returned, there was still a CPS investigation because the Supreme Court stated, there's other things CPS can do with the families. They can have they can place the children with the families and they can monitor, and that's what they did. Actually, it's what they should have done with every family out there, except for the teenage girls, the ones they found who were pregnant at the time. But all of those other children, they could have gone home, and CPS could have continued to monitor to make sure that the children were safe. Require the parents to go to the parenting classes and have a counseling session, and the normal things that happen in a CPS case. Do home visits, including surprise visits. So we were always having. This was the first time I ever gave clients my cell phone number, and I was getting calls. I knew CPS was doing something when I would get inundated with calls from clients about, hey, this is what's going on, what's happening. And so, but when they did, I know they did one home visit, and several ad litem showed up, and several parents' attorneys showed up, and going into their homes, they asked that you take your shoes off. So I already knew that, having been there. So I made sure I had clean socks on, so that when I could, took my shoes off, I wasn't walking around someone's house barefooted or with dirty socks. CPS was also aware of this, but the caseworkers and the CASA people who showed up, I've often wondered if it was intentional. The way they appeared at that, the home visit was intentional or not. I have a hard time believing it wasn't intentional, but most of us by that point were pretty aware of how modest the FLDS are, like the long sleeves and no cleavage showing and whatever. And so we would dress accordingly. Like, we weren't wearing prairie outfits, but like if I had a short sleeve shirt, I would wear a jacket. Just don't antagonize people if you
help them feel
comfortable and respected, and
show some respect. You don't have to like somebody to show them respect. That's first thing you learn as an attorney. Don't have to like you, but I do have to be polite and considerate. But these caseworkers and CASA workers showed up in shorts and in sandals and spaghetti strapped shirts. And so they were wandering around the houses barefooted, dirty socks. If they had socks, they weren't clean. It was just like, embarrassing. If I can notice this and be offended that you're doing it, it was just like the total lack of respect.
And
Like, what do these people have to do for you to respect the fact that they take care of their children love them very much, they're very bonded to their children, and their children are very bonded to them? How, what else do they have to do?
Right.
In order for you to just, use some common courtesy.
Yeah.
Because these none of our clients were ever accused of the things they accused Warren Jeffs of.
Yeah.
Man.
Wow. Man, before we wrap up, was there anything else that you wanted to particularly say or talk about? Make sure I don't.
Well, I think we've covered everything, that was that CPS had done. The other things that kind of aggravate me were things that were happening with the attorneys. But that's more of a deviation from how attorneys usually discuss cases with each other, how we our decorum between professionals when we're discussing our cases. So that's more of a me thing that, and it's not so much as this was something bad that happened to my clients, and here's why. The only other thing that I want to point out from the documentaries is that a lot of these people that they interview keep going on about, the FLDS had this massive PR campaign. And I'm thinking, and you didn't? I mean, you think about everything these people were being accused of, hold it up to a mirror to mainstream society, and we don't come off looking very good. We don't come off looking very well at all. Name one town in the state of Texas that has less than 5 pregnant teenagers. And most of those pregnant teenagers that we do have are impregnated by adult men. And nothing gets done.
Interesting.
Interesting to note, in 2009, January 1st, 2009, and I believe this was in Dallas, one of the first children born in one of the hospitals up there was born to a teenage girl, and the father of this child was in his mid-20s. And it was kind of like, she gets all these prizes for having the first baby of the year in that hospital, and CPS doesn't open an investigation. They don't go after the doctor who delivered the baby for not reporting it. They don't open a criminal investigation into how this teenager got pregnant. They just gave her a bunch of prizes.
Interesting.
And contrast that with how we treated the FLDS.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out, because it's definitely, while it may seem it's such a unique lifestyle, right?
It is.
When people are like, oh, okay, polygamy, that's definitely different. But
that's another.
Go ahead.
Well, that's another thing. Every time I talk to one of the attorneys on the case, bringing up the fact that the husbands had more than one wife, and they had more than one child with these women, and I'm just like, have you talked to the Attorney General Child Support Division lately?
Yeah.
Because it's not shocking that married people have affairs, and it's not shocking to us anymore that men have children with more than one woman, sometimes while they're married to somebody. A little extracurricular activity on the side. So that in and of itself really shouldn't be shocking.
Yeah. And it definitely shouldn't be a reason for an investigation.
I'm not going to lose my head over, oh my gosh, they're polygamists. Well, as long as they're adults, I really, that's really not my call. If they're, if one of them is under the age of 18, yes, then I will get upset.
And it's a concern.
But I'm not going to get upset if everybody is an adult and everybody's consenting. I'm not going to get upset about that, because, again, talk to the Child Support Division and see how common this really is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I had a question throughout this. Do you know
Sure.
about how many attorneys were assigned to the case overall?
If you go by the numbers of children, which is always going to fluctuate because of the fiddling around with the women's ages that CPS did, you're looking at approximately one attorney for each child. That's already over 400 attorneys.
Wow. So there were.
Did that actually happen, or did they like have to cut corners or like group children together? It really ended up being one per one.
It ended up being one for one. But I remember, at least with the children that I was involved with, each one of them had their own attorney, but those ad litems also would get together and decide which ad litem would be, I guess, considered the lead attorney or first chair. And so that would be the one that I would deal with. Yeah.
I mean, that would make sense just for communication purposes. Like, that would seem insane to have 400 when
it was crazy. And then to think about inviting that many attorneys, they didn't think of the consequences of that, because the more attorneys you have with eyes on the petition and at the adversary hearing, and all of us talking to each other about, what happened, and, what grounds do we have to appeal? What are the constitutional issues involved? You have over 500 attorneys looking at that. Yes, we're going to find something. Usually CPS, they'll go into a case and they will just bury you with discovery and all kinds of nonsense, because it's just you working with your client, or even if you're representing the child. But in this case, it was a whole bunch of attorneys, and most of us were pretty angry at what had happened. Because they took all of the children. If they had, and again, I go back to, if they had limited themselves, even as late as the adversary hearing, to just the teenage girls, nobody, we would have just, okay, well, you've got your children back, and maybe, send somebody out there when CPS, if they kept an investigation open, I'll go out there for home visits and visits with CPS and things like that. That would have been it, and nobody would have thought anything twice. But they went after every single child, and especially when they tried to take that baby from the woman who had her child in San Antonio. That is really governmental overreach, and everyone should be concerned about that.
Yeah, that one specifically. I've never heard of that story, and now I see why. But that's
it was written up in the San Antonio paper. Okay. I can't remember the name of the mother or the father. I want to say Jessup. There were a really common name.
Very likely.
Yeah, very common. Yeah, it wasn't. I know it wasn't one of the more unusual names out there.
Right.
I know it wasn't Jeff's. So I'm pretty sure it was Jessup, but I can't. More than that, I can't recall. But yeah, I remember hearing about that, and just like, how can they do that? And they did it. They tried to get away with it, and thankfully, the appeals court took a look at the record. They actually listened to what we were saying, because the district court judge was just like, she didn't want to hear it. She wouldn't allow very much cross-examination of any of the witnesses that were put up by the department. She didn't allow any attorney representing the parents or the children to put on any evidence of their own, which is already a violation.
Right.
Yeah. Of several laws, if not the Constitution. You do have a right of confrontation. Wow. She only wanted to hear from the department, and basically all the department said was, here's a bunch of kids. They belong to the FLDS. Their leader we accuse their leader of marrying underage girls and raping them, and we get all of the kids because of that. And if you think about it, allowing the government to go in and do that, and that's all they proved, to take your children on that basis because somebody living next door to you married, sexually assaulted an underage girl and got her pregnant, that they can come in and remove your children, that should be a cause of concern for everyone. You can still be outraged at what Warren Jeffs did, but you can also be outraged at what the state did at the same time.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Well,
very interesting.
Thank you so much. This is so much good information, so much of a story that we feel like is really not told in all of these documentaries. Yeah. So we just want to thank you for being willing to share your story with us.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity, because this is, this is something that always seems to be skipped over. Maybe they'll ask an ad litem, but the ad litem can only tell you from his or her perspective in representing the children what went on. But the men,
Well, I think that your story is very important, and I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing it with everyone. And just want to say thank you for that.
Yes, thank you so much, Kelly.
Okay, well, thank you. And if any questions come up, feel free to contact me and ask. If you want to have something else and have other people answer questions and go more in depth, because really I've just skimmed the top.
No, yeah, it's crazy how fast time flies when you're having fun. And
I told you I can go on for days.
Well, we thank you so much for your time. And if anybody is interested in hearing more about what it's like for Sam growing up in polygamy, then please like and subscribe. If you'd like to donate to our cause, which is really creating compassion for these FLDS communities and empowering people to tell their stories, not just people who've left the community, but also people like Kelly that are willing to share their stories of their dealings with the FLDS and the compassion that they share for those communities as well. You can click the donate button below or go to our new website of growingupinpolygamy.com and donate there. But again, thank you so much, Kelly, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
We'll talk to y'all soon.
Okay, thank you.